All right. Which ones do you want me to share?
Just the agenda to start, and welcome everybody to the April 28th meeting of the School Safety Subcommittee. We have a pretty relatively light agenda today compared to other days, but I wanted to, for those of you who are able to be in the small group discussions, or if you weren't, wanted to have just a quick debrief on those. Wanted to do a group review. I had written the draft criteria and goals for the SRO program, that when we were asked to kind of submit some ideas to the group, the oversight group for that. And I had put that together, and we had talked about maybe looking at it on Google, but I thought because we have a little time in this agenda, perhaps we could go through it together. And with those of you that are on this call, that could be a good exercise. There's been some, we talked kind of generally on this call. We talked kind of generally on this call a couple weeks ago about what the future of the commission could and should look like. And we captured some of those thoughts in a memo to the mayor so that she could consider that in her budget, because time for her budget was getting a little short. So we had to at least put together some bullets to say, here's kind of the initial thoughts on what the commission could look like going forward. And so we did that. So I wanted to run through that. And I don't think we got a lot of thoughts on this item number 5 when last we met. So I wanted to leave that one on to talk about. So we have a small intimate group here today. So we can pull that back down, Lauren, if you don't mind. So we can just kind of chat informally. I think, Rogelio, you were on at least one of the small group discussions, and Kamal, you were on at least one of the small group discussions, correct? And Dati, I don't remember seeing you on them, but you could have been on the later one that I was on, the earlier one. Did you participate in those small group discussions?
I was on the first early one, but not the second one. Like, I wasn't able to come to the second discussion.
Okay. And Detective UMI, I know I saw you on a couple of them. Any thoughts, I guess, specifically on, I mean, any thoughts are welcome, but specifically on the value of like continuing that type of discussion, and if what you thought about the format or the outcomes, any thoughts?
I like the idea of them, discussing with police officers just a little more intimately, but I don't think they should take a whole commission to discuss. Maybe if they were separate, so we could have more pertinent kind of discussions in the larger groups, that'd be great, just my 2 cents. But overall, I think they were productive.
Okay. What do you think, Kamal? Tati?
Yeah, I thought it was really good. Like, I think the more you can have of those, the better, just my opinion. I like the format, especially like for the first time doing it. I mean, naturally you can brainstorm as they, or collaborate afterwards and debrief afterwards on, okay, this is what went well. This is, hey, if we were to change something, this is what we can tweak. But for a first time doing it, I thought, like, wow, it was really good, because the most important thing to me is to be, to listen, then to obviously be heard, right? And I felt like both of those things were accomplished during that. So I thought it was good.
What about you, Dati? Did you have impressions one way or the other?
Yeah, I kind of would agree that I think it was definitely valuable for the time that we had and the timeline we had to establish that partnership. So I think that it was helpful.
Detective Yoma, any thoughts? Your connectivity is not great, so I can't hear you.
Sorry, I probably have connection.
What?
In the chat, they put that they were driving and that their son was typing, so I'm not sure if they might still be driving.
Oh, okay, I didn't see that. Thank you for pointing that out.
Sorry, I have connection issues.
Okay, well, we'll let you just be a listener for the moment, and when you get to a better spot where maybe we can hear
But
you. Hmm?
yes,
Okay, well, I appreciated your contributions to those discussions. When we could hear you on those discussions, I felt like your contributions were useful, and I guess as a facilitator, it's difficult because those discussions are very valuable. They're better in person, and they're better when you have more time to dedicate to them. So our timeline in this commission is always a little bit challenging because it's the balance of asking volunteers for more of their time to do what you're talking about, Rogelio, because in an ideal world, it would be, and that's one of the things that we've talked about as facilitators, kind of suggesting for the next, beyond June for this commission, is to maybe schedule some of those in as part of our, like we would have commission, subcommittee, whatever that would be, and then a series of those as well scheduled in so that people could plan for them and that they wouldn't overtake the kind of policy work, that they would just be kind of hand in hand with the policy work. So but it does feel like it's never enough time for those type of conversations. They move the needle so incrementally. Did anybody read the book that was suggested? Was it your book, Kamal, that you suggested?
Yeah, I know we have a few who have. I know Darlene and Nicole have gotten into it.
Tell me
So-
the name of it again. I need to reserve it on my library app.
Yeah, the Devil in the Grove, and the reason I recommend it is just because it will give especially like law enforcement or someone, law enforcement as well as those who aren't from African American backgrounds. It will give you it will give you just an insight as to like the Black experience period in America and historically, and why there's such like hard feelings, whether you agree with it or not. Like at least and you'll understand it just from that book. You'll understand it.
Okay.
You'll understand it because it does a great job of like really hammering home the historical struggle from that perspective. And I know every situation is like that, but at least like you get that feeling of what like our parents and grandparents and what many of us and what still goes on in some places to an extent, right? And it's good. It's really good.
Okay. Well, it's not available in audiobook, which is going to make it hard for me, but I'm going to
I thought Darlene had it in an audiobook. It's not available?
not on my
Am I saying
library, not on the library.
that? Oh, I got you. Okay.
What is it called again? Or if you could just send it. if
Yeah,
you have a file.
the Devil in the Grove. I'll put it in the chat. Like it's an amazing book. Highly recommend it. It's a must read on the historical standpoint of policing in America with the real historical stories that are documented that are well documented, even like FBI files that are attached to it. Like it's good. Like it's really good. And it's not a conspiracy theory. Like these are real things that happened that Thurgood Marshall argued. So sorry to take up so much time, but that's it.
Oh, that's useful. I wanted to pull that up. I have it on my list to watch 13th, but I haven't yet. So, well, we can move on from that one. I want to, since we have a kind of a smaller group, if you don't mind, we have two upcoming guests that still want to come. We have a group that I think it was Darlene. No, it was Commissioner Shiflett connected us to a group of like an African American students group that promising. No, that's, I'll find it. They aren't able to join us today, but want to join us in the future. And also Councilmember Mano wants to join us along with a member of the school board. So we have like a formal request for our next meeting for Councilmember Mano to come and kind of just talk to us about the work that we're doing, and along with their a member of their school board, which
You know which one?
yes,
is
let
requesting?
me look at my email really quick because it didn't jump out at me as a name I knew. Let me Councilmember Mano with Bayd, Bayd, Baad.
Yeah, Mohammed Bays. His
Yeah,
daughter is a student at the East.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it wasn't a name that I was familiar with, but I knew you would be. So coming
Yeah,
up,
he's new.
we'll have some members. So with that, I want to, and you guys, I mean, I didn't hear any comment on the agenda, but it was sent kind of late. We can really, with this small of a group, we can do anything we like, but because I had that document with all of the criteria and goals for school safety, I wanted to see if you guys wanted to spend some time running through that, or if there are other things you want to spend our time doing.
I like going over the goals. I think that'd be a good use of our time right now.
Yeah, because a lot of the time when I send this stuff out, we don't have a lot of people who chime in outside of meeting time because of the pressures everybody has on their time. So if we can spend the time sort of doing our homework together, perhaps that will be a good use of our time. Okay, so let me share my screen. Oh, as usual, I have all my windows open. Here we go. Okay. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so we can just run through each one. So what I did is I took the goals from the MOU as it stands and then put each one, how to evaluate program success in the area, how it can be measured, and then important considerations on racial equity for each one. And we can change that, adjust it. It's just what I did. So these are the goals as stated in the MOU. I'm not saying they're right or wrong, but that's what they are currently. So to give them criteria to measure against, I think we have to use their current ones. So their first MOU goal, all of them, in my opinion, are very broad. So to provide for the health, safety, and welfare of school district students, personnel, and authorized visitors and volunteers, which is the school district community. So that's pretty broad. So I'm not sure how you measure success against that. You're muted, Rogelio, if you're talking. Okay. Okay. So here's what I came up with based on our previous discussions. To how to evaluate program success in the area. I wrote review all MOU requirements and review any reports of any party being in violation of these, including required meetings, paperwork, reporting, data collection, etc. So purpose of that one in my mind is because we've seen that not all the incidents are reported in the software. You know, when we tried to look at the data, it was hard to look at. The oversight committee meetings don't always happen, the paperwork, the things that they're required to do. And the other things that maybe I wasn't as explicit is when we did the small group listening sessions with some of the SROs and some of the folks we heard from, at least anecdotally, we've been hearing about administrators or SROs doing things that are outside of the MOU, either being asked to do things that are outside of the MOU or doing things that are outside the MOU. So just making sure that there's actually paying attention to those things that are written in the MOU. So that was the intention of that. Review any real or perceived impacts to the health, safety, or welfare of anyone within the school community. And I added perceived there because I think that it brings in some additional things that might not be like provable, or, you know, some of the conversations that are a bit more abstract that maybe need to be talked about. And you guys can check me on any of this stuff. This is just all out of my brain. Discuss what acceptable levels of health, safety, and welfare should be, and how to flag any areas where this program is not delivering on that level, because this is it's so broad that just saying like, what is the benchmark here? What are we trying to get to? What is negative? What are we going to count as negative? What are we going to count as providing for the health and safety? For metrics, I put twice yearly surveys should be anonymously distributed to administrators, officers, and city staff involved in the program, so that you could benchmark results and then measure it over time. And they should be administered not anonymously, and look at trends for areas for improvements identified. That was the best metric I could come up with. Do you have thoughts, Rogelio?
Yeah. You know, there's a lot for the adults to do here, you know, but I don't see anything for like the students' opinions to be implemented. I mean, they could be implemented some other way, maybe through like the data collection, but I want something more specific where it's like, I want the students to give a general report yearly on how they feel about the SROs, or maybe have them be able to choose, have a voice into who are the SROs that are entering their schools.
So tell me what that, like, let's think about that. What would that look like? Would it be like we just include students in this survey that's included, or would it be something else? What do you say, Dati?
I was gonna say that, so I know this is like a really brief survey that occurred, but basically the Utah legislature now has a bill that has been passed that demands that every school, every district evaluates each high school and elementary on their overall like health, safety, and well-being. And so what they did was they gave out the survey to all the students. So I took it last week, and it has like a couple really vague, very broad questions like, do you feel safe around your SRO? Do you think your SRO keeps you safe? And then one other question about the SROs, which I do think that the district will give us access to that data once they've compiled it all. But I think it'd be a
Salt
kind
Lake
of a poll
District?
marker.
Was it Salt Lake District?
Yeah, Salt Lake
Or
School
the
District.
state?
Every Utah school has to
So-
take it. So
Okay.
Exactly.
yeah, I think it's called like the
It's
school
mandated by
climate.
the state. Yeah.
School what?
Yeah, school climate. Yeah. The
School
school climate survey or something. Yeah. So it's mandated by the state, but each district can control how they execute it. Sort of
And
similarly in those guardrails.
yearly? Is that when it's
I think that
administered?
This
survey's
is the
done
first
every
year
2
that
years.
Mm,
I think it's done every
yeah,
2
this is the
years.
first
If
year
I,
that I've seen it.
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I think you're right, Rogelio, because I would have been like a lot younger. But yeah. So going back to Rogelio's point of using inclusive of youth recommendation from the schools that are being pleased with an SRO. I think that, while we do have access to the data, there also has to be a way, or kind of like, like how you are developing a way to evaluate these things, how to include what students have to say. And what I've noticed is that, I don't know, there seems to be a really large disconnect for me where I hear from other students at West about what they think is happening versus from the actual officers that I speak to. Like, like, okay, in the MOU, it says that you can't stop and search on campus, correct?
Mhm.
And then I have students telling me that they go off campus 1 block away to the burger joint down the corner, and then they're frisked. So I don't know, I don't know what is the truth, what is not, but I'm inclined to give them the benefit of the doubt because they're the students that are in this situation, and I'm sure that they wouldn't do that if they didn't have a reason to be vocal about it. And so I think those are the things that a lot of us don't hear, especially because it's a lot harder to evaluate in a survey. But yeah, I think just being inclusive of that and then kind of speaking with SROs. I know that we used to have an SRO that West High had a really great relationship with. A lot of the students really liked him. And then he left and he went to a different position, I think. I'm not entirely sure. But we had a new SRO which had a lot of tension with some of the students, but I see like larger administration making choices on our behalf. Like they think that a good SRO for West High means that they should be able to speak Spanish and that's it. Or they should be a woman of color and therefore that's the requirement. And I don't think it's as cut and dry as we make it seem. And a lot of students would rather prefer to have a choice in that matter versus having adults just decide what the requirement.
So how can what's a recommendation? We could put that in here. We could also put it as a recommendation, but tell me then because I mean, this school climate data, and whether it's yearly or every other year, might be too zoomed out if it's for the state. I don't know. I mean, hopefully they're going to collect enough data. Dati, you took it. Did they collect enough data to know like what school you're in? So they could trace that back?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that feels like maybe one piece of the puzzle that you're talking about, but how do you get it drilled down to that? Like, I mean, do we want students to sit on this oversight committee? I'm just brainstorming what would be,
Yeah, well, well, when it comes down to it, I would ultimately like a group of students to be actively involved in the hiring process of the SROs, and them
I
have like
agree.
a veto pass of like, I don't think they'd be good for this school. We shouldn't have them here, because students, I don't know, like they understand the cool school climate better than one would give them credit for. An officer always coming in is always coming in with a lot of presumptions and different understandings of what is actually going on kind of on their daily lives of the student, and it changes consistently.
Yeah,
So
and then
I think
agree
another.
with Rahelia,
Oh,
and then
sorry.
oh,
So,
yeah, go
so I think another important piece is you always want feedback from all stakeholders. So I think students definitely need a voice. I think obviously like staff definitely needs a voice, but also the community in general needs a voice too. And that's usually within school decisions. You need all three components within school decisions, and including the SRO. But in saying that, within the SRO, again, like to me, a lot of it depends on the administration, because the SRO can't go rogue, excuse me. The administration is in control of schools. Like he can't overstep them. So I'm just curious. I'm not familiar with West High School, but I'm just curious how much the administration, how much power they give him, because I know our SRO won't do the SROs I've been a part of the past few years. They won't touch anything without administrative permission, and they can't in a lot of things. So you're talking about like searching, for instance, like an SRO just can't search a student. It's in to my understanding, like admin can search under certain conditions. I think they can only get involved if it's probable cause, if I'm not mistaken. That's the only time they can ever get involved. And if they're getting involved where they don't have that, then that's a problem. That sounds like a lawsuit to me, in my opinion.
So
yeah,
then
I would, yeah. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, with those other stakeholders, then Kamal, like, do you have a thought on how? I mean, would we suggest that the hiring of the SROs? I don't know how that happens now. If administrators have I know they can veto, right? An administrator can ask for a new SRO at any point. I've read the MOU, I feel like recently when I did this, and I'm pretty sure it says that the administrator can request a replacement, but I don't know if there's much say on the initial hiring or assignment. And maybe Detective Yama, if you know, you could type it in, or if we can't hear you, I don't know.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we
Yes.
can hear you.
Okay, hopefully the connection sticks. So with the hiring process, as far as in our department, how I got hired on, they send out a bulletin to the whole department saying anyone interested in being an SRO. They take that list, and then
And then something happened.
there's obviously ones that they ought to mark them. Huh? Can you hear me?
You cut out a little
no.
bit. We heard you get a list, it's sent out, and then something.
Okay, so you get the list, and then with our supervisors, they kind of scan over it, and there's ones that are automatically to them that should not be an SRO. So they kind of just cross them as other thing. Interview with East and with Highland when I was being offered the openings over there. They said those are the openings that we have at Highland and at East. So I had an interview for East, and I think 2 assistant principals over at Highland.
Okay. So you were cutting out, but I think we got the majority of that. So there was a list, and at the time you were hired, there were 2 openings. You interviewed for both at Highland and at East. But the one that Pete, the detail that I missed is who was in the room, like who was on that hiring committee. I think I heard you
Okay.
say the administrator.
So hopefully this connection's better. So when I went in for East, there was the principal that did the interview with me.
Mhm.
And then for Highland, there was 2 assistant principals that were there because I think the principal at the time was out doing something. He wasn't available at the time. So
Mm.
I had 2 assistant principals sit in and do the interview. And then with that, they give the recommendations to the sergeant and lieutenant, and they kind of mull it over amongst themselves, and then they put who they think would be into that spot.
So it sounds within that process, if that's still the process, it sounds like there might be an opportunity at the school level to decide who might be in that interview room. Like if right now it's just with the administrator, perhaps at the school level, there could be an opportunity to involve student, maybe a couple students and a community member or something like that. So perhaps,
Yeah, I think that would be a good thing to have, like you said, the other components, community, students, and then the admin sit in and do the interview. Those are the ones that are going to be interacting with the SRO. So with that being said, I think it'd be nice because you only get it from the school perspective, from the admin. I would also like to get students to talk to me so they can see whether or not I'm a good fit for the school or not, So I think it's a good idea.
yeah, and I think from an engagement perspective, that also it creates some buy-in on the fact that the community and the community member and some students had some say here. So like then you have, hey, we thought this person would be good for this reason. So at least then there's some say in the process. So I don't know that we've spelled it out entirely for them here, but at least a recommendation. And you guys can tell me, we can also move that over to our recommendations document, because this is just, I think we can submit this as part of our recommendations, but to pull those out as specific recommendations, to say some more student involvement in but then is there something more we want to say about surveying the students or like evaluating, like in that evaluation process? Because we said maybe put some students on the oversight committee, but is there something better, or are we okay with that school climate survey being the one that dictates, or do we want to do something more Salt Lake district specific?
I think that there needs to be a separate survey. But with that being said, like a lot of the students don't know what an SRO is. Like I was helping other students complete the survey. They're 7th and 8th graders, so they're 12 and 14. And a lot of them, haven't been in high school, so they didn't really understand what an SRO is. So as long as we kind of leave that pathway open in the survey, because I don't want that to muck up the results, which I think it did for the statewide survey. It definitely mucked up what really happened because a lot of students had no idea what it was. But I do think that there does need to be a yearly survey for students to do that. And the other thing is that I don't know, I'm sure you have this in one of the recommendations listed, but an avenue to complain. Like I had a lot of students tell me that they had no idea how their parents are supposed to file an anonymous complaint against an SRO that could then help them.
And that is,
when I talked to,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Dottie, finish your thought.
Okay. Well, I was going to say, and then we had a board meeting, and they also agreed that there was no avenue to have a direct complaint or one that was clear enough, like listed on the website, etc. Like there wasn't a way that a family could easily navigate that process. So I do think that we do need a yearly survey that all students should take. So whether that means paper or digital, there should be allotted class time because it's important for students to respond.
Yeah, I think that was the other thing, because I was like, if it's something you just elect to take, then the only people that are going to take it are people who are angry with the SROs, and that's a skewed data set, right?
Exactly.
And so I liked what you said. So like some allotted class time to do this, to complete.
Yeah.
And maybe school specific, but what I'm saying here is maybe use that in those for the oversight committee, like have that be submitted to the oversight committee so that they can see from the student's perspective how well things are going.
Mhm.
And maybe then, Kamal, you can tell me if that would be something that then the administrators might also be able to use to make recommendations on keep or find.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think as admin, you always want as much feedback as you can get. So I mean, I think that's great. And the only question I would have, okay, like which students are we choosing and who's choosing them, right? Because to me, it's like admin always wants the final say in something like that. Like as an administrator, it's important to have an SRO who obviously understands your school culture and understands the expectations, understands the school goals, the school climate enjoyment. Like they have to understand all that, right?
Mhm.
And sometimes you get like we had an SRO that was out of touch. We had to get rid of him at my school, and we got one that's amazing right now, like just amazing. And but in saying that, I'm just curious, like how an administrator can handpick who they want student wise, who they know, because you know your students, right? You know your students, and to me, like either if you don't handpick them, then I also see the other thing happening of a certain students with just one ideology of getting together. Like if it's student input, I'm hoping it's a diverse opinion or an exact representation of the student population and not just the group who has the most influence,
You mean
whether that's money, whether that's politically, whether that's,
in the
through social
hiring
justice.
process? Is that what you're talking about, or in the?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
So I'm hoping I don't know how you choose students. I don't know how you do it. And that's what I like to brainstorm, like how we do it in a fair, honest way to where you're going to get a true representation of what it is you need in your school from the different perspectives, especially like let's take a school as diverse as West. You're going to have so many different cultures. You're going to have so many different points of view. Like me as a parent from a Muslim background, I want an SRO who's strict on drugs, who's strict on gangs, but at the same time who doesn't profile anyone, right? But at the same time, like if there's drugs being dealt in that school, they better find them. Like I have children in this district. They better wipe that out. I know that better not be all loosey goosey and stuff. And that's what I worry about, like with different ideologies. But again, that's my opinion. Others have different opinions, right? Others are like, hey, that's not a big deal if it's weed, if it's this, if it's that. Like, and that's why it's important, because I know my community's big. I know we're influential, but I also know we're not the only ones, and there's differences of opinion, and we respect that. So, but we want to make sure our voice is equally heard as well, and that's important.
So Dati, you had your hand up. Did you have a thought?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I know that there's a lot of questions, like there definitely is, if we look at these recommendations of how are the students going to be selected. And I would say that there are a couple of choices here specifically for Salt Lake City School District. One, if you want a really great representation, especially for West High, of the student body, I would suggest the student body officers that the students themselves elected. Oftentimes we have a really, really great cross section of different races, different cultures, and overall students who are very well measured, who are very optimistic and hopeful, because those are the students that get elected. And I do think that giving student government a stake in deciding larger decisions for their own community is going to give them a larger say in things, as well as I won't be the student board member anymore. My term is up probably in May, I think, but the next student board member will be there from a different school other than West, but they could also have kind of an overall representation that would help as well. But I do think that admin can choose one or two students that they would like to recommend to serve on the committee if they feel that they're lacking in representation. I want brown communities to be represented, like the Asian community, the Latina community, Black and other brown students. I think that having multiple representations are super important. And if we look at the student body and the student government, and if those aren't enough, then admin should be more than welcome to recommend multiple students who they feel would fulfill that, if
It-
that
it-
sounds satisfactory. I don't know.
And to build off that, one thing I think actually might be a good idea if admin let staff recommend as well, and not really admin. I don't think when I say admin should reach out to staff to recommend. I think that would be very powerful because who knows students better than teachers, right? And as far as say you might be missing someone who's a great fit.
Yeah, you're right. That's going to be the best, I think.
Okay, so I captured that brainstorm right there of, you know, where those people could come from. I want to encourage, I know Detective Urama, you're not ideal on the connection front, but these are things like we're coming up with ideas on how you might be measured. So don't be afraid to speak up and let us know if any of these sound unreasonable or untenable. So I'm going to keep us going through because there's several of these. And then what I put for racial equity, that the survey should collect demographic information on any reported issues or any trends so that we could follow any disparity for students of color, like we haven't been able to follow very closely just yet, that if surveys are created, that they should collect demographic data just as a baseline. And then are there important differences in how health, safety, and welfare are defined for communities of color in this conversation? So that was just a question, like a consideration for them to consider. I didn't take it all the way to the end of the line and spell it out. Are there any other things when we're talking about health, safety, and welfare, like in the racial equity, like to help them put a racial equity lens on that criteria? Is there anything else you would add to that list, or do those feel good?
See you in 2 days.
Yes.
Finish today and then tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll see you tomorrow. There are children in my home. Sorry. Any other racial equity thoughts, or did those feel okay? I mean, I will still send this out again since we're missing so many people, but so I will take us through. We won't consider it final until we get everybody's buy-off. But so this is the second MOU goal, is to maintain a safe and secure environment in school district facilities and at school district programs by the parties acting swiftly. And when they say the parties, it's like the school district, the SRO, the admin, like everybody who was a party to the MOU. The parties acting swiftly and cooperatively when responding to major disruptions and flagrant criminal offenses at school. So that was goal number 2. How to evaluate program success in this area. Do we have clear definitions of what safe and secure environment means in the school context? So again, these are really broad goals. So I don't know what they're trying to say, like what safe and secure environment means and how they define that, because that feels like a pretty big gap of interpretation of what the admin might think is safe and secure, what the student might think is safe and secure, and what the SRO might think is safe and secure. So I didn't know what else to say about that, but that other thoughts, how you could evaluate that if you were on the oversight committee? No. So my idea for metrics here, after action reviews is something, I think it might be a military term. I'm not even sure where it came from, but it's basically a lesson learned to say after action reviews should be conducted after each of these incidences with representation from the police department, the school district, and city staff. Ideally a member of this commission or the CRB as well. And a report from the after action review should be provided to all involved. What went well? What could have gone better? How could we improve the next time through PowerSchool or whatever the current tracking data software was? Basically to say, like, we have one of these major disruptions or a flagrant criminal offense. And Detective Uema, if you have, I don't actually know, I know a little bit about how these are reported, and Kamal, you probably know as well. But basically to take it that one step further and convene, like if we're really trying to improve, convene a meeting after that happens, like a little debrief with representation from each party and say, okay, did that work the way it was supposed to work, the way we lined this out to work, or did it need to change, and be just a bit more intentional about evaluating them as they happen, rather than maybe taking a big bundle of them at the end of the year and trying to squeeze out what you can. So that was one thought. And I said these reports should be reviewed at the quarterly meeting of the oversight committee, and so then they can see trends and what's happening when these flagrant criminal offenses and major disruptions. So clearly I didn't have as many thoughts on this one as I did the first one, but and then important considerations on racial equity I just sort of left. Anything we need to add to maintain safe and secure school environment. Like that's feels like a pretty major function of the SROs, but I don't know how to measure it. Anyone?
I don't know, man. Maybe just some clarifications on like what major disruption would be considered. I don't know. I want the students, I don't know what would be considered like you said, it's pretty broad, and I just want to be able to just maybe, yeah, just want to know what would be a major disruption and what's like a flagrant criminal offense at a school. Just maybe some examples to get that range smaller on what could be that.
So maybe that's a recommendation that we could, and I don't know if it goes here, I have a section at the end basically for like, next time you do this MOU, you should be a little more specific about X. So maybe that's where we could put that as just offenses to include in future MOU language, perhaps, and I can move that to the bottom, but I feel the same way, like this is, it's very broad, painted with a very broad brush, which I'm sure is by design, but it's difficult to evaluate. And I'm sure that's what they've been running up against when they're trying to evaluate this program, is that's hard to nail down. So, we can keep rolling and come back to these. MOU goal 3, I didn't have a whole lot here. To report serious crimes that occur on campus and ensure cooperation with law enforcement officials in their investigation of crimes that occur at schools. So I don't even know. Detective I don't know if you can hear us, but I don't understand this one. That's why I didn't write anything, because I don't understand. I mean, to report serious crimes that occur on campus and ensure cooperation with law enforcement officials in their investigation of crimes. So is that just like when a serious crime happens, the SRO calls in the police? Because they are not supposed to be part of the response, correct?
So just to clarify, I think the House Bill 259, along with the district, they have it. I swear they have a chart where it shows what kind of offenses that we will tend to and others that we will not. That way, it helps clarify what things we will be doing. Kind of like truancy, we don't do truancy anymore. That's not us. That's strictly on admin. So even like if the kids are over at Sugar House Park and I walk over there because we get complaints of kids smoking or whatever, I'll walk over there. Kids will just run away, but I know some of them and I don't know some of them. Some of them that I do know, I'll call out by name, they'll stop. But, even then, I don't issue them a truancy ticket. I just talk to them and I advise them to go back to school so they can further their education and whatnot. And that's it. As far as that, like even fights, that's handled administratively. Unless someone wants to become a victim, then they end up coming up to us and then they'll file a report with us on that. So there's, like I said, there's a chart. I swear it's with the district, along with the House bill, that kind of clarifies what we will be taking care of as a SRO versus not. And then as far as us, I mean, an SRO is a police officer. We're sworn in. So if there's cases, we actually handle it unless it goes beyond our scope of expertise. I did have a child abuse thing where I ended up handling, but I had to call out our special victims unit detectives to come and help out with that because they're a little bit more educated and trained on that stuff, on the interviewing techniques and whatnot. So
Okay.
it varies. If that kind of clarifies on stuff, I know it's not specifics, but like I said, I think there's that chart that the district has that kind of clarifies what's SRO versus not SRO type of things to handle.
Okay. I mean, yeah, I guess I didn't understand enough about the genesis of this goal to write anything to measure it to, because this feels it feels kind of repetitive to the one above it. And I guess I mean, I can only assume that there was a problem with cooperating with law enforcement, that the admin weren't cooperating, because that's the only thing I could read into this. Perhaps we can ask Moises about this one directly, because I am sure he knows. Dati?
Yeah, I was gonna say that I'm not sure if this is directly related, but like I know that Kamala, you said that usually admin has direct oversight over SROs and then they can't overstep over admin. I don't know when this goal was put in place, but it seems really similar to what happened to West High's former principal, where I think he said that he was invoking like restorative justice, I think. I'm not, maybe Siobhan, you can explain this to me. I'm not entirely sure what that means, but basically that he went and drove a couple intoxicated students off campus and back to their homes. But the SROs then reported him because like it was policy to keep them in the office where they were safe, or something similar along those lines. So I'm wondering if,
I think this was created as an offshoot of that. That's my understanding, is that
Okay.
this was created in 2018. And that's about the
that's
same.
right, that's right, that's the correct
And
timeline.
so the goal of this was, as it's been explained to me by like Mark Cottrell and the attorneys and stuff, is that it was to clarify the role of the admin and the role of the SRO. And I think it may have been to that end that you're talking about, to try and make sure that there's no room for interpretation on whose job is what. And if an incident comes up, however, these goals leave a lot to be desired. I'm sure that the language under there probably accomplished what they were trying to do at the time, but left these goals really wide open. So,
Can I say something just real quick?
Yeah, of course.
And just in saying that, I'm just, from what I've seen, not over 90% of the issues in schools when it comes to students being mistreated, even with involvement to the SRO, just from what I've seen, is directed by admin. Like admin is the issue, in my humble opinion. SRO might be getting the blame for it, but I guarantee you it's an admin behind them directing the scenes to where that SRO is put in a bad position. As much as we can hold admin accountable in these situations as well, is what also needs to be done. We have to somehow tie that with the SRO, tie it within the language, in my opinion, or we're just setting our students up for failure, in my opinion. A really good point was brought up earlier, and Rogelio, am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yeah.
You brought up some really good points, and it just got me to thinking, just from a restorative justice standpoint, that we try to implement in many of the schools now. We're trying to problem solve many of these issues, like many of the issues, teachers not having the necessary training to handle certain situations, which escalates, gets sent to admin, who sometimes don't have the necessary training to handle situations. And where the easy solution to all of this, get the SRO. The easy solution to when you don't know how to problem solve, get the SRO. Instead of, hey, let's dig deeper into what the true problem is, and let's try to fix on a restorative justice level, right? And that's the issue, is schools not having the necessary resources and teachers feeling comfortable enough to problem solve within their classrooms, and admin problem solve with tough situations. Just for instance, just had a kid yesterday came up to me, he threatened two of us. Obviously I don't care. I'm not worried about a kid. I feel like I can take care of that issue if it came to it. Obviously you hope it doesn't, but in saying that, the easy thing to do in that situation is get the SRO. Kids getting violent, kids threaten you. We didn't do that, but I can see people easily doing that, and I can see that situation escalating because people don't have the necessary skills in order to problem solve. And again, I really think this issue is admin. I really think this issue is staff, and I really think SROs get the bad end of it. If we don't include that, we're going to be doing the same thing in a few years from now, in my opinion. to a stronger accountability of admin and staff. They play a strong role in this, and that's what I'm saying. Whatever bad experiences went on at certain high schools, specifically West, I guarantee you, staff and admin had a huge hand in that, and they're getting let off the hook. That's my personal opinion.
Okay,
Can
go ahead.
real quick.
Yes,
I just want to make sure you can hear. So I kind of agree with
Kamal.
Commissioner Ahmad
Mhm.
that what he said. You know, sometimes the admin, they're not. I think sometimes they don't understand the MOU, so we have to re-educate them because they tell us like, "Hey, the kid's doing this or doing that," and I said, "Sorry, I can't." Like, there's one administrative person that called me from one of the schools saying, "Hey, I've got kids that are dressing up in blue and this and that, Dodger this, Dodger that," and I'm like, "Okay. I mean, is there anything else other than just dress?" Because I said that's not. If you're assuming that it's gang affiliation, I think you're kind of off with just the fact that everybody's dressing like that. There's got to be a little bit more than just dress and appearance. There's got to be a lot more to indicate it's heading in that direction. But you know, I have to educate sometimes the admin or staff that this isn't what you're thinking. I can see what you're assuming, but you know, to me, that's still in the same sense of like the profiling thing. So I try to educate them as much as possible along with my squad mates. There's other things that they want us to do, like they won't put away the cell phone in class, and I'm like, well, sorry, but that's not something I handle. That's all on you guys, and you guys got to figure that out. I mean, I said, if you want, you can bring him down here and I can chit chat with him, but he's not gonna get busted over it. That's nothing for me. And I don't want to be used as muscle either. That's not my job, you know? But the thing is, I always like talking to kids so they understand, like, hey, how can I help you make better choices, this and that. So that's what it is. Sometimes, like you said, we just got to correct admin and educate them on what we can and can't do.
Yeah, I would actually agree. I think that admin did have a really huge hand in it. If you look at the report, it does say that admin was the one who did call the SROs on that incident. But I do want to say that for most students, when we deal with admin, it feels like it's a circle. Like, I have a teacher right now. The average grade for all the students of color in her class is an F, and all the white students have B pluses. We graphed her grades. We had students come up with her grades, and we can't do anything about it, right? What are we supposed to do? We're supposed to go to the principal, and the principal is going to go and talk to the teacher. And then all that's going to happen is that she'll have a flag on her report card of her being a teacher. That's it. And I think the problem here is that with administration, it becomes a lot harder for students to do anything about admin, because when you do anything about teachers, it goes back to admin and the circle repeats over and over again. Like, if I want to complain about this teacher, or if I want to go with my parents, then I end up speaking to the principal, and the principal ends up speaking to the teacher, and then it just repeats over and over again, because I don't see any guidelines. I don't see a rule book. I don't see anything for how something should specifically be handled in the case of teachers. Like, I had one of my teachers, like last year, we had one student who was having fun and decided to climb up one of the hallways, like up the lockers, and then she called the SRO on him instead of asking him to just come down, which he would have done willingly, because as soon as the SRO showed up, he was like, I was on my way down. And I think that that's exactly like an example of using an SRO as muscle power, either to get the kid down or to force him to come down through intimidation. And I think there's no amount of training. Like, obviously teachers don't receive enough training on how to handle an SRO. It shouldn't be the SRO's job to tell them how to use the MOU correctly. Both parties should be equally as responsible for how we govern our students. And for students, I really have to say, like, in my case, it's easier to get justice from an SRO than it is to get it from a teacher. And I think that says a lot about the education system, because I don't see a way out.
I know we're short on time, but you brought up some really good points. I agree with everything that was said, and I think you hit it right on the spot as to where the issues lie. You hit it right on the spot. Just great job with that.
So the way I characterized what you said, Kamal, is that accountability for any issues that are sort of mishandled, the accountability should be shared. It shouldn't just be, so I don't know if that's a fully formed thought, but just to capture what you said with that accountability should be shared. And then I added this because you were mentioning like that they don't get a lot of training or they may not have the skill set. So what I heard there is that maybe some joint training, like, or scenario planning ahead of time between the admin and the SRO to say, if this happens, what's our plan? If this happens, what's our plan? So that they're
And
not.
staff.
Okay.
Staff is critical because especially if admin's not in the building or admin's not available, I'm telling you, it's SRO, SRO, SRO. And I think that's where many of the problems come. Our SROs are put in some really bad positions and our staff is let off the hook.
We lost Detective Yeoman. I'm sure you all have places to, oh no, they there. Places to go, but I want to, I'm going to skip the next one because I don't think I actually have anything in them to foster educational programs and activities that will increase students' knowledge. I mean, I think that's a great positive one that, you know, rather than focusing on all the negative reporting and things of SROs, I think that's an opportunity to really lift up the SROs that are doing a great job, that have, you know, the basketball teams and the things that are really popular and useful. So maybe we could talk about how to measure that and talk about where the SROs are doing really well so that they can have a path forward to like, here's what makes an SRO great. So if you're entering, you're not just guessing. So to improve school climate is crazy. So we suggest that improving school climate should be further defined so the progress towards the school can be better measured. Tracking student ratings on interactions with SRO, parent ratings. Hold on a second, buddy. Participation in SRO initiated events, approachability of SRO, tracking the number, type of outcomes, referrals to the juvenile justice system. Man, I really had good ideas on some of these, and some of them I had no ideas. I wrote this a long time ago. I'm remembering what I wrote. Efforts should be made to benchmark the current disparity for outcomes of students of color and track improvements on those metrics. When we talk about improving the school climate, consider adopting the policy that intentions can't be measured, only outcomes. So valuing the outcomes over the good intentions should be the focus here, which is just, again, these are all out of my brain. So please feel free to shoot any of these down. And I will send out a link to this. So if you feel like wordsmithing it, you can. But one thing I want to draw your attention to before we go too far, encourage the SROs to attend outside of goals. But I created a section here called suggested additional goals that were like just maybe for future SRO, MOU negotiations or whatever. But we have our FTE there to we were suggesting that person that gets hired in the mayor's office perhaps could be the person who leads out on evaluating and helping this get better. So I guess if you have ideas that don't fit somewhere else, you don't need to try and fit a square peg in a round hole. Just try and we'll collect them here. And then maybe next time I'll send this out to those who didn't attend and just say, please track your thoughts. And then we can look at this. And I think, like we talked about today, I think it'd be good to identify, like, if you have time to go through and maybe highlight ones that you think we should pull out of this and stand up as standalone recommendations rather than just being in this criteria document. Let's talk about what of these we want to pull forward, if that makes sense. So with that, I think we have accomplished what we can accomplish today. I will just say generally, I was going to go through that whole memo with you guys about what might happen after June, but basically we said because we talked in this subcommittee and the other subcommittees talked about like what could it look like, and basically the consensus is more or less it should keep going with this group, because this group is just now like actually getting some good momentum and is starting to understand what they're supposed to be doing, and at least for some period of time should continue with this group, assuming that some people will probably have to, you know, go off to college or do whatever they're going to do, but that to some degree we should keep this group, but perhaps lessen the frequency, so it won't be every week, because some people have felt frustrations with how much time they've had to dedicate to this. And we, like I mentioned, talked about fitting in some more of those intentional conversations. So we're not just hitting on the policy side, we're hitting on the cultural change side of this conversation. And also, I have suggested, and they, I think it was Nicole and said like it needs to still be facilitated because it's too much work for us to try and facilitate ourselves between meetings. So those are the kind of recommendations that move forward to the mayor, because she just needed something to put in her budget to recommend. And then I also suggested that at some point when it's safe, that we should all have like a full day retreat, basically. Like not like a party, but like, you know, a full day retreat to actually like sit in a room, really like, and really unpack some of these things that an hour doesn't allow us the time to do, to really do some concentrated work. And then, you know, maybe I'll have dinner together or something we haven't been able to do since we've all been on Zoom for this long. So those are the kind of things we put in that memo. So just for your information and for transparency, that's what we're suggesting might be a good path forward beyond June. So look for that. And now it's 5:07, so I think we are done, and you've done your job for the week. So thanks for being here. And any final thoughts from commission members? This is great. Thanks for taking the time to walk through this a little bit, and I'll share the link to it so you guys can keep digging into it if you desire. Okay.
Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
You guys had a great input.
Yeah.